Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I thought this time I would cash it up slightly and just be on the sofa comfortable. Hope you're all doing well. What's going on? I really hope despite everything that's happening that you guys are managing to get out and see your friends and family. So for anyone who's new here, I'm doing a two-part series called Kidney Transplant 101. Today's video is all about the transplant, donated very kindly by my dear papa, what it was like for my dad and for me, some complications that I had after the transplant, my medication that I take on a daily basis, and hospital checkups and what I have to do, every year for my kidney health. So let's get into it. I hate saying that. Why do YouTubers say that? Let's get into it, as if you wouldn't be getting into it. What else would you be doing? So my dad offered me his kidney, the most amazing thing that anyone's ever done for me, and I can never thank my dad enough. And I know he's watching, but thank you, Dad, again. So the first step to having a kidney transplant is to find out if the donor is going to be a match. And there are three main tests that have to be done for this. The first one is blood type testing, which essentially looks at your blood and antibodies to make sure that the two blood types can work together. So for instance, a donor that is type A can donate to a recipient who is type A or type AB. If they're B, they can donate to B or AB. If they're AB, they can only donate to AB. And if they're O, they can donate to any blood type. Now, we passed that one. The good thing about a parent donating to their offspring is that there's at least a 50% match. So that's already in your favour. They use something called the S12 antigen test. And this looks at 12 markers between the donor and the recipient. Now, in a perfect match, you would get 12 markers matching between both. And if there was less of a match, you would have less markers that lined up. So we passed the tissue typing and antigen test, and that is brilliant. So we went on to the next stage, and that is something called percent reactive antibody. I don't remember this, but it basically says, this is another term that you will often hear while being evaluated for a transplant. When you are exposed to foreign tissues, either through a blood transfusion, pregnancy, or previous transplant, you may develop an antibody to different HLA proteins. I don't even know why I've gone into the details, no one's going to care, but we essentially passed all the tests, obviously, or I wouldn't be talking to you about this now. So the estimation for us was October, and I started my dialysis in September the year before, so it was pretty much exactly a year. So my dad had to have some further checks just to make sure that he was healthy and that him giving me his kidney wasn't going to be detrimental to his health. It's very invasive, and you have to make sure that anyone who's donating is going to be able to take that kind of surgery. And actually, the recovery is often worse and longer for the donor rather than the person who's received the transplant. I was really excited, but at the same time quite nervous, because there's a high chance the transplant won't take and that your body will reject that organ. My last few weeks on dialysis were kind of strange, because I was thinking, on one hand, this might be the last time I have to have dialysis in my life. But on the other hand, I was thinking, don't get cocky, because it could fail and then you're going to be back here on this ward in a few weeks' time. I tried not to dwell on it too much while I was having my dialysis. So we got given the date, which was the 17th of October 2003. That was the day I had my kidney transplant. So the week of the transplant, I had lots of extra blood tests whilst I was on dialysis. They were just checking my levels and all of the compounds and chemicals in my blood, making sure that everything was still in a good place. My dad came to the hospital maybe 1 or 2 days before, and then my mum came and we all went out for a big dinner. I was hoping it wouldn't be the last supper, but I have to be honest, I was sat there eating my pizza, express pizza, thinking, this could be your last meal. I genuinely was thinking that, what if this is my last meal? I tried to just block it out. So, the day of the transplant, I woke up quite early in the morning, probably didn't get a lot of sleep. My dad was in a different ward, he wasn't next to me, so I couldn't really chat to him or anything, but I think I did go and visit him and just see how he was, make sure he was okay. Then we went into surgery, and I think it was at 10 o'clock in the morning, because a kidney transplant usually takes about 4 or 5 hours, I think, and so they try and start them early in the day. You're both in surgery, I think in neighbouring theatres, and they essentially just go, it's that easy. It's like plug and play, it's like Lego. I can't really tell you much about that part of it because I was asleep and I wasn't aware of any of it. I didn't feel it, I didn't hear it, and I'm very glad about that. Your kidneys are at the back. They're sort of either side of your spine in your lower kind of back region, middle to lower back. When you receive a kidney, they don't put it in the same place because it's difficult to get there, and it doesn't need to go there. It can go further forward as long as it can be hooked up to the right things. And it's just in your abdomen, and I'll show you where it is, and please don't be grossed out because there's nothing gross here, it's just a scar. That is where they put my dad's kidney in. Literally there. And the actual kidney itself is there. Right there. The first thing I do remember is waking up in the recovery room, and yeah, I felt really, really sick. I get really affected by anaesthetic. It really has a horrible effect on me. Yeah, I haven't experienced pain like that. It was really bad. I remember clicking this thing, and it would beep to tell you that you were getting a dose of morphine, and I basically maxed it out, and it has like a cut-off so you can't obviously just overdose on your morphine, and it just wasn't enough. And I remember having to speak to them and practically beg them to give me other drugs because I was just in a lot of pain. Dull, deep, like, it's hard to explain, but yeah, it was very, very painful. The first few hours are critical because that's when your body is going to start to build up antibodies and start attacking that kidney. You can't just receive a kidney and then, even if you're a match, and then your body accepts it. That's not how it works. You actually have to still suppress your immune system, what they call immunosuppressants that you may have heard of, and they essentially suppress your body's ability to fight off foreign bodies. Even if you have 100% match, which I didn't have, your body will still recognize it as a foreign, invader. So it will attack it. So you have to bring down your body's kind of armies, if you like, and make them a little bit more suppressed, and then that way you're not going to damage the organ transplant. And that's why that first period of time after the transplant is critical, because although you've prepared your body with these immunosuppressants, nobody knows how your body's going to react to this. And so there's lots of analysis of your bloods that's happening. I think you're having bloods done every hour or every 2 hours for the first few days. It's constant blood tests just to make sure that there's nothing crazy going on. After about a week, I started to kind of wake up a bit more and feel more lively, and I tried to get up and walk around a few times, and it was really difficult. I could hardly walk. I'm not even exaggerating. I could hardly walk at all. And every time I needed to go to the loo, I had to be helped by nurses, and I had I think I had a wheelchair, so it wasn't a fun time. But luckily I was really young, so that probably was massively in my favour because I was 22 when I had it. Obviously, my dad and me had both had operations, major operations, and I really wanted to see him and make sure he was okay, but I couldn't because I couldn't walk and he couldn't walk, and we were in different places in the hospital. We weren't in the same area because I was on the renal ward and he was just on a general recovery ward. So that was kind of strange because I knew he was in the same building. I remember having this overwhelming sense of relief. I suddenly had this realization that I could have a normal life and I could do all the things that I'd once dreamed of doing. That was like a really emotional moment for me because I got my life back, and I knew that was a possibility, but I didn't dare think it when I was on dialysis and before the operation because I didn't want to jinx it and I didn't want to be disappointed if it didn't come true or if something went wrong. And I just remember being really happy and thinking, wow, I can't wait to just get out of this hospital and get recovered and just get my life back on track. And that was a really amazing feeling to have. About a week into my recovery, there was a slight issue. They were detecting some resistance in my body to the kidney. They called it a minor episode of rejection. So for a few days, I had a steroid drip that basically just wiped out everything and enabled my body to sort of relax a bit. I don't remember being like frightened or anything. I think that was pretty common, and it was explained to me that it was nothing really to worry about. And that's a really good point, actually. The really incredible communication of the staff at the hospital at every point. So the renal registrar, who was essentially my kind of go-to and my way into all the information and telling me what was going to happen. My surgeon, I remember her, she was incredible, and I can picture her right now. I can't remember what her name was, but she was really incredible. She was a real sort of like take no shit kind of woman. And I remember her coming and talking to me, and she said, look, just ask me any questions that you have, and I did, and she was just so calm, and she explained everything. Although I was going through this kind of epiphany moment of realising that my life could happen again, my dad, meanwhile, is in another ward of the hospital, recovering from a major operation. I can't be there to comfort him or check on him and make sure he's okay. People that were coming to visit me were also going to visit my dad, so obviously I got updates from them and I knew he was okay, but it just wasn't the same as being able to go and see him in person. And I remember the first time I was able to properly walk, the first thing I did was go and see my dad. I said to him, don't worry, I'm going to look after your kidney, Dad. And he told me, yeah, you better or you'll be in trouble. I just called my mum on the phone because my memories of everything that happened are a little bit blurry because it was a long time ago. It was 17 years ago. And also it happened very quickly, and I was kind of comatose for a lot of it because I was on so many medications. But she said people were coming to visit me straight away, and I was probably just out of it, and that's probably why I don't remember that. But I had lots and lots of presents. I had loads of cards and balloons and flowers, and people would buy me grapes, even though I don't really eat grapes, but I guess that's the hospital thing, isn't it? People that were kind of didn't even know me that well, who were sending me cards and coming in and dropping in and seeing me, and it was really amazing to feel that kind of support, really. And it made me sort of realise what a big deal it was, and I'd kind of almost in my own head tried to make it smaller than it was because that's my way of dealing with it. One of the things I used to do, which I really enjoyed, was popping down to the ground floor to go to the tuck shop and explore the treat section and see what was available. And I used to have to walk down there probably at the actual speed of a real ant. So it was just like one step, two, and I was wheeling this trolley, and I had my drain, my steroids, my saline solution, and my catheter all hooked up to this thing. I don't know, some circus freak walking around the hospital with this wheelie thing. And obviously I'm in a hospital gown, proper good NHS hospital gown, probably with my arse hanging out of the back of it. Yeah, that must have been a sight for people to see. And I enjoyed that because I got out of the ward and it got me into different areas that I hadn't, been able to explore. Getting used to taking lots of medication was quite strange as well, because I think at the beginning I was taking about 20 to 25 tablets a day, which was quite a lot to keep track of. Now, obviously in a hospital, you're just given the meds, so it's fine. But I had to start thinking about how I would organise it myself when I left the hospital. I remember having to have like a training session. I had like a planner which had all the different medications, the doses, what times I had to take it all. I take my meds in the morning and in the evening, so 12 hours apart. But then I think I had to do 4 sessions, and it was quite tricky. I also had my 23rd birthday the second week I was in hospital. That was fun because my mum came in. Did we go out for lunch? I've got a feeling, yeah, we did. There was this really good pub around the corner from the hospital, and I was well enough to kind of walk a bit further by that point. I remember eating a starter and being completely full, feeling like I was going to explode because the steroids I was taking made my stomach kind of go huge, like I was pregnant. I couldn't physically put much food inside my body because there was just so much pressure and it was really difficult to eat. However, I still enjoyed it and I still made myself eat. I regretted it after, but it was my birthday. So I had to. There's another funny story. I'll just quickly tell you another funny story. I remember hating having a catheter. It was the most uncomfortable thing tugging at you through the night. I asked the nurses if I could have it removed, and they said we shouldn't be removing it yet. It's meant to stay in for another few days, but I insisted because I hated it so much. The next morning I woke up and I was absolutely busting to the point where I felt like I was going to pee myself, but nothing. I couldn't get anything to come out. They basically told me that I could have a blood clot in my bladder. I was on like the 9th floor, I think, and I remember going into the stairwell and walking up and down all of those steps all the way to ground and back, and I did it about 5 times, hoping that this thing would be dislodged, but it wasn't. And then I had to go and grovel at the nurse's station. The good thing about having a catheter put in when you're in an operation is that you don't have to experience it. So I remember having to sit there, and I had 2 nurses basically lubing the catheter up with anaesthetic gel and then shoving it in. And it was the most painful thing. The embarrassment, and it taught me a lesson, which was do as you're told. Palm olive shower gel, that's what they sold at the shop in the hospital. So whenever I smell that now, I'm transported back to the week of my transplant. So cut to 2 weeks post-operation, I'm gearing up to go home. The day of my release, I say that like it's prison, I notice I have a slight itch on my abdomen, like it was about here, kind of around my ribs, and I didn't think anything of it. I thought maybe it was something to do with the medication or something. I think they took a photo of it. The renal registrar wasn't there. So they released me, and my mum took me home to her house, and it was the most incredible thing just to be back home and not in hospital anymore. We were due to have a barbecue and a fireworks party because it was Guy Fawkes night. Everyone was round, my family were all there, my friends were there, and we were having a really great time. I remember the phone ringing, and it was the hospital. And they said, we've got your test results back. We're phoning to tell you that you've got shingles and that you have to come back into hospital tomorrow. So after 2.5 weeks of being in hospital, finally getting out, 2 days later, I had to go back into hospital because I had shingles. It can be quite nasty, and I had it's like a severe rash that was around my ribs. It usually follows the nerves, so you usually get it in a line along a pathway of one of the nerves. I wasn't in any pain, it was just really itchy. I had to go back to hospital the next day, which was such a shame because I was just really enjoying being free again and being out. And yeah, I really didn't want to go, but I had no choice, obviously. So when I got back to hospital, they put me in an isolation room on the top floor, which was the 12th floor of the Royal Free Hospital. And the Royal Free is in Hampstead/Belsize Park. It's on the border, and it's on like a really big hill that overlooks the sort of main part of central London. And I had the most amazing view from this room. I could see the Millennium Eye, the Wheel, Parliament and Big Ben, the City of London and all the skyscrapers. It was such an amazing view because fireworks night was in the following week. Fireworks displays going everywhere constantly, and it was the most amazing thing to watch. And I remember just sitting in the dark in my room, like just chilling out, and at the same time I was just like watching this amazing whole City of London fireworks displays menagerie happening in front of me, and it was just incredible. And then the whole thing repeated again the following weekend, so it was really cool because I got to see all these amazing firework displays from this cosy, comfy room on the top floor of the Royal Free Hospital. That actually made the whole thing okay. The one thing that was a bit annoying was that I couldn't really see anyone because I was in isolation. You essentially can give someone else chickenpox if they haven't had it, so no one was allowed to come near me. The weird thing was I was able to go out of the hospital, but I had to just leave the ward, go straight downstairs and walk straight out of the hospital. I wasn't allowed to stop anywhere in the hospital. And I remember going to HMV and buying DVDs because I had my laptop Oh yeah, I had that old laptop, yeah. Back when DVDs in a laptop was like a big deal, so I was able to watch films and stuff. I remember them calling me a few times because I was out of the hospital for so long. They wondered where I was and where I'd gone, but the truth is, I just couldn't stand being in hospital anymore, so I just went to cafes and stuff, and I would sit there with my laptop in a cafe, just online, doing stuff and watching films, because I didn't want to be in hospital anymore. But then in the evening it was fine because I had the fireworks. So a week went past and I managed to shake the shingles, and that was the last complication I had. I had the rejection episode and then I had the shingles, but then I was okay and I managed to go home and stay home. I had to go to the hospital every week for blood tests, and then I slowly transitioned into 3 monthly appointments, and that's what I've been on, ever since. So what is a renal checkup? Well, usually what happens is you go for a day appointment as an outpatient, and there are a few parts to it. So the first part is you have a blood test and a urine test, and they're testing for your creatinine level. And creatinine is essentially your waste products that are in the blood. The other thing they check for is the concentration of your renal medication in your blood to see how much of it you're metabolizing. One of my immunosuppressants is called tacrolimus, and that's something that's very common amongst organ transplant patients. And you have to have your tacrolimus level done and your creatinine level done. They're the two really key things that they look for when they're doing a blood test for someone who's had a renal transplant. The tacrolimus level is also used to change the dosage of your tacrolimus. So if there's not enough concentration in your blood, then they may slightly increase your dose, and vice versa. You also have a urine test as well that goes with the blood test. The two things together are kind of what gives them an indication of how your renal function is. You go and see the nurse and they do your blood pressure and your observations, they take your weight, that kind of thing. I then go and see my nephrologist, just have a catch up with them. They usually ask you how you're doing, and if you've got any strange ailments or anything. When you're a transplant patient, your whole chemistry of your body is different. Your immune system is obviously suppressed and not fighting things and repairing things like it should be. For instance, if you've got issues with your skin, which is a really common one with transplant patients, then they'll refer you to the skin clinic and they can take a look and help you. And often you'll have a few different relationships in your hospital with different departments because of the complications of having a transplant. And that's just unfortunately the way it goes. Then if there's anything that's not quite right in your bloods, they'll probably just call you back to have another test, because often things fluctuate and they're quite delicate. Especially make sure you're drinking lots before you have your tests done so you don't have to retest constantly. Another thing that they always talk to you about is skincare. Now that's a really big thing for renal transplant patients. We have to be really careful with the sun and our skin. And my doctor will be really pleased that I'm saying this on this video, because she is a real advocate of skincare and like protecting yourself to a really high degree. So I'm not supposed to go out in heavy sunshine, in strong sunshine at all. That's the first thing. And if I do, I'm supposed to wear factor 50 or above all the time. Now we're advised, even in the UK, in the winter, we're supposed to wear factor 50 outside. That's how serious it is. That's how much damage we can get from the sun on our skin. I don't wear factor 50 every day because I don't really go in the sun that much. I try and avoid the sun, and that's the best thing. If you can actually avoid going in the sun in the first place, that's better than anything. Whenever I'm outside in the sun, I've always got sun cream on. That's why I don't really ever have that much of a tan, because I actually go really dark in the sun, but I just don't allow myself. If I walked into my appointment with my doctor and had a tan, I'd be in a serious trouble. That's basically it. We can quite easily get skin cancer. In any hospital, you'll see signs up there for the patients. Factor 50 all the time, don't go in the sun. Make sure you drink lots of water, keep yourself hydrated. Fluids, no sun. They're the two things that you always get bombarded with whenever you go. It's just a reminder for us to look after ourselves, because we don't have the same natural defences that someone else would have. We'll have an ultrasound on our kidney every now and again to make sure that the blood flow there is as it should be. We'll also have things like a bone density scan. So I guess now I'll just quickly talk about how it affects our lives. Now, I can only really talk about this from my point of view. I don't really know any other renal transplant patients apart from my mum. She's actually a really good person to talk about because she has lots of complications. But it was one of the first transplants ever, and her transplant was actually from her mum. We didn't know as much about renal stuff as we know now. So the medications now are incredible what they do, and the side effects are limited, and the long-term damage is also limited. But in the early days, they didn't know the long-term effects, so the medication was more toxic, and that in turn has caused a lot of side issues for my mum, unfortunately. But my mum is a survivor, and she will not let anything get in her way, and she has many health issues, secondary health issues associated from probably her renal failure and her 2 kidney transplants, but she doesn't let any of them get her down. She soldiers on, and she is the person in our family. She's the matriarch of our family, and she's the person who kicks everyone into gear and makes sure that we're all appreciating everything and living our life to the fullest. You know, if my mum can do it, anyone can do it. My daily life is like any normal person, really. I do get a little bit more tired than perhaps someone else would. And the way I'd explain this is when you're really pushing it to the limit, I don't have the same amount of stamina. I get a lot more tired at that point. So if I'm up to like 80%, I'm probably the same as someone else. But when I get to really pushing it to the limit, then I really start to struggle. And most of the time I don't ever see that because, you know, we are lucky, a lot of us, most of us hopefully, are lucky that we don't have to be in that extreme position all the time. But I work in events, so I go through ebbs and flows. You know, in the planning stages, it's never too crazy, although it can be, but it's not sustained crazy, just like, you know, momentarily when you have deadlines and stuff. But when you go into the event mode and operations, you can't move the Olympics. So we know when I've worked on the Olympics, for instance, and many other big sporting events around the world, and when the event's on, you do what you have to do. And it's at times like that where it's like a real challenge for me, but I like a challenge and I accept that challenge. And my thing has always been, I don't want to stick out and be that renal patient, that person with that condition who people need to make a dispensation for. I've always been really independent, and I've always wanted to maintain that and make sure I'm not given special treatment, because I don't want special treatment. Unless I'm in a position where I have to have that special treatment to survive, I will reject that special treatment. However, COVID has slightly changed that, because clearly people who have had transplants are more at risk, way more at risk, because they're on immunosuppressants, so we don't have the same natural defences as a regular person would. So I've had to isolate a lot more quickly than most people would. I essentially left my office before the office closed in general, and my bosses were brilliant, and they were really supportive and very understanding, and I was able to do that, so I'm very lucky. But it must be really hard for people who work you know, in a field where they're not necessarily in an office environment, but they maybe have a more of a physical job or a job where they have to be there in person. That must be really difficult because they don't have a choice. They have to isolate, they have to shield, and that's just how it is. So I really do hope that employers have been understanding to those people, but I'm sure somewhere there's people who are struggling. So my heart goes out to those people, and I really wish them well, and I really hope that they are getting through this crisis as best as they can, and that they've got a support network around them. The mask thing is taboo at the moment, right? It's something that is very much on everyone's tongues, and there's this big debate about whether masks work and whether they don't work. Now, I've done a lot of research, and this is something about me in general, with medical stuff and scientific stuff. I don't just take what I hear at face value, I hear an opinion and then I go and investigate it and I go and find out if that can be trusted. I've seen studies from lots of different places around the world, different universities, different companies, and pretty much the general consensus is masks do have a positive effect at blocking the virus to some degree. They're not 100%, of course they're not, and nothing is ever going to be 100%, but they make a significant difference to the point that it's worth making everyone wear masks. And that to me is a good enough reason for everyone to wear them. And I really do think that, at the end of the day, it's a piece of cloth that goes over your mouth. This isn't forever, this is for a short period of time. We all need to do our bit to protect everyone in our society. Some of us are more vulnerable than others, and if you can just wear a mask every time you go into a shop or, any time that you're in public mixing in close proximity to people, that makes a massive difference to people that are vulnerable, because not only does it protect them for real, it actually makes a massive psychological difference to those people. Because when I'm out and about and I see someone not wearing a mask, I shit myself, basically, because I know that if I catch this virus, I'm pretty much finished. It will be the end of me. So the only thing that allows me to go out and have a fairly normal existence, in inverted commas, is the feeling that people around me are on my side and they're protecting me as well as each other. And if people refuse to wear masks, I can't go out. I can't go to shops. I can't go to public places because it's just too dangerous. The risk is too high. And that's why I ask people to wear a mask, because even though you might think that it doesn't do much, for people like myself and other people in vulnerable categories, it's the difference between being able to go out and not being able to go out for us. I stayed in my apartment for 3 whole months without even going outside of my door. I didn't even cross my doorstep for 3 months because I was so terrified about catching this. I've ventured out, so now I do go to the shops every now and again, not regularly. I try and still get some deliveries. From a mental health point of view, you have to kind of try and at least have some kind of, external experience rather than just these 4 walls of the fish tank that I live in. Something that I do really miss is my friends and my work colleagues and getting to, see people face to face. And I'm not complaining and I'm not asking for sympathy, because that is the last thing I want, believe me. But just to explain how it is, just so that you can understand how it feels. My friends all still, they've started going out for dinner again and they've started having breakfast, and it's been a few of my friends' birthdays, and one of my friends has actually left Dubai and I wasn't able to go and say goodbye. I wasn't able to go to my friend's lunch for his birthday the other day. I had to just stay away, and that's really kind of frustrating because I feel like I'm missing out on my friendships and that group, but they're obviously continuing, because why wouldn't they? That's not to blame anyone else other than this bloody virus. It's no one's fault, but that's just the situation. I don't see my family regularly anyway because I'm living in a different country, so that doesn't feel too strange. But not seeing my local friends, that's really hard. That is really, really hard. When I was younger, I used to really reject anything around my transplant because I didn't want to be defined by it. Now, 17 years later, I've not been defined by it. Most people don't even know about it. That's partly why I'm making this video. I could have just stayed in London and stayed in the same company and I could still be there now. I sort of felt like I had a second lease of life. I could have just settled for surviving. I felt like it was my duty to strive for more, not just for myself, because I could, because it was possible now. And it was a real case of making the most out of what I had. I've actually travelled around the world with my job, and I'm respected for what I do, which is, really, it's really nice to feel, that you're good at something, that people ask you back to do it again. So I've worked in Azerbaijan twice over a 3-year period. I've worked in Australia. I'm working in Dubai at the moment. I've also worked in different parts of the UK. I've worked in France. I get to travel a lot for work, which is great. And now that I'm older and I'm kind of doing all of those things, I've sort of embraced my condition a bit more, because now I can look at it from a different point of view. I'm really one of the lucky ones. If I don't use that to the best of my ability to go for it and live my life to the fullest, I think that's an insult to the people who weren't so lucky. And I want to be a kind of inspiration to other people who are maybe about to have a transplant and have maybe worries and doubts about what it means for their life. And I want to say to them that you can do whatever you want to do. And we're only here once. And we don't have long. So we have to make the best. And that goes for everyone. So thanks for watching. It's been emotional. I hope that people found it interesting and didn't just fall asleep. It's really hard to be objective when it's, you know, so intertwined with who you are. But I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please give it a like. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. I really appreciate your time, and share this story with other people. Comment down below if you know anyone who's been through a transplant or renal failure. I don't really have anyone else to go on, and it'd be really nice to hear some other stories. And with that being said, I'll catch you next time.